We begin tonight with the raging inferno that destroyed several sets on the Universal Studios lot. Tonight we know the fire started accidentally. That's the word from LA County's fire chief. For more on what fire investigators have learned right now, we go to Willa Sandmeyer live at Universal Studios. Willa.
Good evening, Emmett. And the fire chief explained just how this blaze began. He said a work crew had been using a blowtorch to warm asphalt shingles that they were applying to the facade of a building. They completed their work about 3 o'clock in the morning and then stayed by for about an hour, making sure everything was okay, following procedure. Then they took a break. And by the time they returned for a second check, the fire here was underway. LA County Fire Chief P. Michael Freeman says the fire that burned on the backlot of Universal Studios was the equivalent of an entire city block up in flames. The blaze burned for some 12 hours, with 400 firefighters battling to keep it from spreading. At times, firefighters poured a collective 18,000 gallons a minute onto the flames. Some fire crews complained there just wasn't enough water pressure and were forced to tap lakes and ponds at Universal for a water source. The chief says a task force will study that complaint in detail. The chief referred to the flow of available water as fire flow.
We want to go back and actually calculate the fire flow, and to see exactly at the time of the first unit's arrival how much fire flow was needed, what's their ability to deliver that fire flow, and where's the water going to come from.
The chief says the water system at Universal City, while privately maintained, is up to current fire codes.
There's no indication at this point that the water system was inadequate. It may be, given the amount of fire, that's the issue.
LA County Supervisor Zev Yaroslavsky says the county wants answers, particularly on how to better respond when a major fire occurs at a movie studio.
We've got to find out what happened in the first hour or two where there was inadequate pressure compared to what happened in the subsequent hours where there was good pressure. And so what was it that went right in the third hour that wasn't going right in the first and second hour?
Chief Freeman also said that it was his decision to delay the reopening of Universal Studios by some 3 hours, not until noon on Sunday. He said he was concerned about fire that was still burning in a video vault, fire that earlier had sent up thick black smoke, and he wanted to make sure firefighters had it fully under control before Universal Studios reopened to visitors. Live at the scene, I'm Willa Sandmeyer. Lynette, back to you.
And Willa, now that we know the cause of the destructive fire, we want to tell you more about the movie sets that were destroyed. They were definitely a very big part of Hollywood history. And Chip Yost continues our team coverage from Universal City with that part of our story. Chip.
Lynette, you remember those scenes from Spider-Man 2 outside of that New York City theater where Mary Jane was performing, where those scenes were actually filmed here at Universal on a set known as New York Street. Well, now that set is gone, along with many other pieces of movie history. You may remember Universal Studios Courthouse Square from this Back to the Future clip, or any number of other TV shows and movies filmed here. This is what that same set looks like today, a day after a fire ripped through the studio and theme park. As news cameras were allowed in to take a look, the land of make-believe was coming to grips with reality. More than 3 acres of this famous studio lot have been destroyed.
The New York streets were lost. The King Kong attraction was lost. The part of Courthouse Square was lost.
Evidence of lost archives were also everywhere. Burnt film spools and film cases littered the ground where a video vault once stood. Possibly in the rubble, film and video clips from TV shows like Miami Vice and I Love Lucy. Universal says it has duplicates of everything it lost, and that it will rebuild the parts of the studio that were destroyed by the fire. Now, according to our partners at the LA Times, this won't be the first time they've had to rebuild a set here after a fire. After a 1990 fire, they also had to rebuild that New York set. Now, earlier today, they did let guests back into the park, but as Jamie Chambers reports, many of those guests may have been confused about what was part of the famous tram tour here and what wasn't.
As we get our first close-up look at the burned-out film studios in the back lot of Universal, it's hard to tell between what the fire ravaged and what was the set of Steven Spielberg's movie War of the Worlds. But even with the acres of charred land, tourists were still banging down the doors to get in. The Jensen family drove 10 hours from Utah for their first trip to Hollywood.
That's something we would joke about. Like, we're going to Universal Studios. Oh, it actually caught on fire. That's something we would joke about, but it was actually true. So it's pretty ironic.
But not everyone is thrilled by the destination.
No, I just didn't really care about coming, so it was kind of a good and a bad thing.
Were you rooting for the fire a little bit?
Just a little bit.
Where did you want to be?
I'd rather go to Disneyland.
Tourists say the fire was scary, but now it's over and it's time to ride.
If the park is open, I think it's safe for all of us to be here.
Just hope everybody's okay and that the park opens up the day I want to go.
But some movie buffs can't shake the massive amount of damage the studios have sustained.
King Kong is, I can't believe how long it's been here since, again, like I was a child. And to see it go away, it's just really sad. And, my kids, when they get married and bring their kids, they won't have that anymore. You can't rebuild something that's history.
Well, the silver lining to this fire is after the writers' strike, set designers were struggling to find work, and now they'll have all they can handle. From Universal Studios, Jamie Chambers, KTLA News.